Hey there, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm Cam and I'm so glad you joined. This reading vlog is going to be about The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. This is going to be my read-along journal for the Game of Tomes read for the month of May, which is The Brothers Karamazov, and then it will be compared with June's read, The Stranger by Albert Camus, I think. Never heard of the book before outside of the Game of Tomes, so I have to get it. And I don't know what the themes are going to be, but I'm assuming that if The Brothers Karamazov is one of them, that it is going to be about fathers and sons, maybe even sibling relationships, lies versus truth, the morally gray of when it's okay to lie, when it's not, what it's okay to lie about, what it's not. Yeah, I'm kind of excited to read this. I have wanted to read this again for a really long time. I have actually read this before, and I've read this exact copy. For half a second, I thought that was the Triforce. I read The Brothers Karamazov 8th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. I think it was 8th. So I would have been like 12 maybe when I started it, going on 13. I didn't like it, but I also think it wasn't written for 13-year-olds. So I have waited a very long time, and I wanted to get back to this as an adult to see if I like it any better than I did. I have a feeling I will. I have a feeling that 13-year-old me just wasn't ready. It wasn't for me. It wasn't for me, but I think it is now. So I'm excited to go back and read this. You know, I'm not great at vlogging, so the next clip you see may be when I complete it. I don't know, but we'll see how this goes. So I have 2 copies of The Brothers Karamazov because this hardcover is my original. I did not want to annotate this copy. I did not want to do anything to, I love this hardcover version. So I got a paperback that I can annotate and mark up and everything, and then leave my hardcover copy kind of pristine. I mean, it kind of looks like a cat got it. That, you know, pristine as far as it is now. Rory really wants to play with that bookmark, I can tell. Oh, there she goes. Good morning. Okay, so this is an interesting week for me. A lot of stuff has been happening, and it's been kind of crazy. Short rundown. My bathroom upstairs sprung a leak, and within half an hour my basement ceiling had collapsed, dealing with that. Once the basement ceiling and walls started getting torn out as part of the repair, we found like 2 other leaks that had caused issues in the past that we had no idea about. That has to be cleaned up. I have a large shed / barn-ish thing in my backyard that has its own power supply that started shorting out, but not flipping the breaker. And I have a chest freezer out there that I almost lost everything in because I didn't realize that the power had gone out. Turns out ants are deciding to make their home in my electrical box. So that's great. So I've tried to address that, and I've gone a couple days now without any issues, so we will see if that is done. And then yesterday, as you just saw, I was at the hospital. Not a big deal. It's something I've needed to do since high school. I have gallbladder issues, and I needed a test to prove that I have gallbladder issues. So the test was a HIDA scan with CCK. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think I heard one of the nurses talk about it. Basically, it was supposed to take 4 to 5 hours. It has to be done in the hospital because it involves radiation. So I had to go in and I had to get an IV in my hand. They had to inject me with saline solution, sit around for 45 minutes. I did not bring my Switch. So that was disappointing because I barely had any time to play Tears of the Kingdom, which is hurting my soul. 45 minutes, and then they see if the saline has passed where it needs to pass so that they can then take the imaging. If it hasn't passed where it needs to pass, do you have a blockage? You might need some surgery right away. So everything was fine with that. So then after the 45 minutes to an hour that I was already there, then they started injecting me with the radioactive component along with a hormone that your body makes when you eat that tells your gallbladder release your bile so you can process fats. Normally they would do this over a 3-minute period and it would cause excruciating pain and severe nausea. Apparently they don't do that anymore. They drip you with an IV for an hour. 3 minutes of horrendous pain or an hour of mild annoyance. So I laid on a bed under an imaging scanner for an hour and basically had a video made of my gallbladder to see if it's emptying properly. Spoilers, it's not. So this should get me approval for surgery so I can have my gallbladder removed. Again, I should have had this done like in high school. I have a family history of gallbladders. Everybody else had the easy kind though. They had gallstones, which one ultrasound, you got gallstones, get your gallbladder out, you're done. I do not have that. I have had my gallbladder scanned multiple times via ultrasound. They can never find any gallstones. So I was told my whole life, you don't have gallbladder problems. I do. When I finally saw the right specialist, he was like, oh, your textbook gallbladder problems. He said, but it's not gallstones. It's that your gallbladder isn't functioning properly. There's something called an ejection fraction. A lot of people are probably familiar with this as far as like heart ejection fractions, which is how much blood it can pump out of the heart and to the rest of the body. Gallbladder also has an ejection fraction, and it just means it should be pumping this much within this period of time. Normal range is 38% or above. Mine is at 21.8%, which is actually not as low as my doctor suspected it would be, but it's well below threshold, meaning it's not doing its job well enough to be useful to me, and it's causing a lot of problems. What, you may ask, are problems that your gallbladder could cause you if it's not working properly? Gallbladder attacks, and I've had multiple people ask me, what does a gallbladder attack feel like? It feels like what I suspect a heart attack feels like, but also add in a low blood sugar crash. So where your ribs, you know how like your ribs are, they kind of come down and then they come up in the middle and you've got this like little dip of your where your ribs meet. That hurts really, really bad during a gallbladder attack. It's a very sharp pain. It can last for hours sometimes. You have to take all pressure off of it to feel better. As it gets worse, if it gets worse, it will feel like you know those like superhero movies and sci-fi movies where somebody gets like poisoned and you can see like the blood vessels in their body coming up their neck and they're turning like black. Like you can see the blood vessel all of a sudden and they're going black. That's what it feels like. It feels like every blood vessel in your chest up through your neck into your jaw is constricting and trying to choke the life out of you. Your own blood vessels are trying to kill you. Your chest is very constricted. It's very painful. It hurts to breathe. It can easily be confused for a heart attack. And then on top of that, you feel like you're having a low blood sugar issue where you can have hot sweats alternating with cold sweats. You're shaking all over. You can't think straight. So that's what it is. It can also lead to extreme nausea and vomiting, sometimes projectile vomiting. Sorry, too much information, but I have I've retched so fiercely that I ended up with petechia all underneath my eyes, which is the capillaries bursting from the pressure. And then when I finally finished retching bile, I had blood freckles, basically. They're not cute. That happened in high school, and I was terrified. I did not know what was going on. While I was retching, I thought I might die because I could feel the pressure in the veins in my head, like in my temples. I honestly thought I was going to have a brain aneurysm and burst a blood vessel that I needed to live. But I was also very, very stubborn and did not want to go to the doctor and have it dealt with because I knew that getting tested would end with me getting my gallbladder out. And I'm like, it's an organ. I feel like I should leave my organs in my body. You don't need to, though. And if you were suffering from this, don't. In other news, I did start the Brothers Karamazov last night. Once I finally got home, I had a bunch of errands to run and stuff. Since I had the entire day off work, I was actually able to get some stuff done. So yeah, I started the Brothers Karamazov finally. And I'm already annotating quite a bit. I am color coding each of the three brothers. And I think I'm also going to be doing a specific color code on spiritual versus intellectual philosophy debates. I know that's a huge part of the novel. And I'm trying to figure out, it's really hard sometimes to know what you're going to annotate until you get partway through the book and realize that something is a very important or recurring theme, or it's something that you really want to pick out. I have the benefit of having read this before. I think as I read, things will kind of start coming back to me. Obviously, there's a lot of biblical references because one of the brothers is training to be a monk, and there's the overreaching debate within the story between two of the brothers about spirituality, faith, religion versus the intellectual and the secular. So that's going to be a huge component of it. It's going to take me a while to get through this because I am starting it at the end of the month, and this is for the May read. There's no way I'm going to get this done in the next 5 days, but I technically will have until the end of June to read this because it will be May and June's books on the Game of Tomes, which will be compared with, let me check my bookshelf. I don't have it on my bookshelf. The Stranger by Albert Camus. I think that's the book, which is incredibly short. So at least they paired a pretty chonky book with a very small book. But I at least have until the end of June to kind of do both. I also still have to film my Game of Tomes reading response for David Copperfield versus Catcher in the Rye. Basically though, I'm just playing Zelda. I pre-filmed so that I would have at least a month of not having to film anything so I can just play Tears of the Kingdom. And then because everything hit with my house and everything, I have barely played the game, and it is killing me. It is absolutely draining the life out of me. But things are kind of calming down a little bit, and I'm starting to play a little bit more. And then I also have a bunch of reading to do. So I'm going to be filming my Brothers Karamazov vlog. You probably won't even see this until like a month after all this has happened because it's going to take me so long to get through this book. But I am looking forward to it. I am enjoying it. Interestingly enough, I have two copies. I have a hardback and I bought a paperback so I could do all of my annotations. They are by different translators. I don't like the translation in the paperback. It is a little bit more like Old English translation terminology, whereas my hardcover is more trying to capture the spirit of what was being said, not translating literally word for word. I like the translating the spirit of works better. I think it's a more accurate translation because like if you might have a saying in, let's say you have a saying in English, more nervous than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. We know what that means in the English context of and the imagery. That word for word translation may mean absolutely nothing to, let's say, like Pacific Islanders, but they might have another saying in their culture and their language that means the same thing. If I do a literal translation into a Pacific Islander language, they're gonna go, they'll understand the words, but they won't understand the spirit of what it's saying. But if you find something similar in their language and you translate it into that, it's not gonna be the exact same euphemism, but it's gonna mean to them the same thing. So I prefer translations that do that instead of the word for word. And I think the paperback that I have is more word for word. So it's really weird. I decided I'm going to read the hardcover. But when I find something to annotate, I'm going to find it in the paperback and annotate it there. It's a weird system, but it works for me because I'm reading the paperback and I'm like, I don't understand what the sentence means. And then I go into my hardcover and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now. So yeah, that's it. This is all I got for now. I'll be filming, like I said, this whole vlog as I get through this book. And I don't know if I'm going to include The Stranger by Camus in it. I don't know. Maybe I will, just to make it easy and just have one vlog. So anyway, that's what's going on. If I get any more updates on my gallbladder, my surgery, scheduling, all that stuff, I will let you guys know. So. So I did have to switch to an audiobook because there's absolutely no way I'm going to have time to get this book in just reading it straight. And I had to run some errands, doctor's appointments and things today. So I'm listening to it, and this narrator is kind of driving me crazy because he keeps saying Fyodor instead of Fyodor. And I'm like, no, it's not Theodore. Like, you're not, like, the reader's British, clearly not a native Russian speaker, but he's saying Fyodor, and I'm like, Fyodor. Like, I'm not fluent in Russian, but I've spent a lot of time around native Russian people, and my brother was fluent, and even though I may not be saying it exactly correctly, Fyodor is definitely not correct, and it's kind of upsetting me. Other than that, the character of Fyodor is really funny. The way that everyone despises him and he just like leans into it is kind of cracking me up. His interchanges kind of early on in the book with the church folk, the elders and the monks and the Father Superior. I'm not gonna lie, I'm laughing. I am laughing. It is really, really funny. I know that you're supposed to hate this character, and he is like a debauched character. He's written very comically though. I just think it's funny. I think it's funny so far, and I was not expecting to get this much humor out of this book. I mean, it's not like laugh out loud, you know, has me in stitches, but it is amusing. Other than that though, some of these conversations they're already getting very deep into philosophy and theology and everything, and it's just like, it's not that I can't follow necessarily, it's just that it's kind of dry to the point where I'm like, okay, but does it matter? Like, do I care? And I just know it's going to get more and more and more that way, but it's not unbearable at this point. And it is sprinkled with some he's definitely the comic relief.
I'm just a glorified extra, Fred. I'm a dead man anyway. If I'm gonna die, I'd rather go out a hero than a coward. God, maybe you're the plucky comic relief.
I know he's gonna die, but you know, for now, it's funny. Hello everyone. Yes, I look a mess. I have a face mask on, and it's that zombie face mask, so it's like pulling my skin in. This is as far as I can open my mouth right now, but I just had to make an update, and every time I try to move my eyes, my forehead cracks. No, don't laugh. Stop laughing. Oh God, stop laughing. Okay, so I am back in the office this week, and so I'm trying to look like a human being, hence the mask. But I am now probably about a third of the way through the Brothers Karamazov. The way that the characters are generally described, with Dmitri being the sensualist, Ivan being the intellectual, and Alyosha being the spiritualist, spot on. I mean, they're generalizations, but as you really get to know the characters and see them talk and interact, they epitomize that characteristic. And it's interesting because Dmitri, who is the greatest suspect in his father's murder, is the most like his father. However, there are some very big differences. So while I would agree that Dmitri is a sensualist, I don't see his father as a sensualist. Fyodor Pavlovich, is that how you say it? I always say it that way, and then I think I say it wrong, and then I look it up and I'm like, no, I think I said it right. Yeah, Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov. I don't consider him a sensualist. I would consider him a full-on hedonist. Now, by my understanding of the definitions, a hedonist is like far beyond a sensualist. Dmitri is concerned mostly with general enjoyments of life, but specifically women. Someone to love, to be obsessed with, to lust after, is really the thing that drives him throughout this story. His interactions with his father, his conflict with his father, is mostly about money to continue his lifestyle, specifically as it relates to the women in his life. Whereas Fyodor Pavlovich, he is to the nth degree. He loves to lie. He loves to act the buffoon. He loves to go after women, to indulge his absolute most base desires. And so to me, he is so far beyond what Dmitri is. He is gross and base and vile, but also funny. Like, I cannot help sometimes but laugh at his conversations with people, specifically his conversations early on in the book with the religious leaders of that province. Hysterical. Alyosha is just this big, fluffy golden retriever. I mean, he's just so genuine and sweet, sees the good in everybody, loves everybody, trusts everybody, but not to the point of like naivety, because his genuineness inspires in others trust to be reciprocated. And so what Alyosha sees in these people is a true part of them, because they're giving that back to him, whereas they wouldn't necessarily give that to other people that they meet, especially Alyosha's brothers. Now, Ivan is the one that I really understand the least. He's definitely had the least page time so far. He has made some really interesting arguments and debates on things. Ivan, to me, is personification of what the church meant when they created the position for the devil's advocate. Because Ivan initially argues for religious and theological control and judgment in ecclesiastical courts when he's basically an atheist. He doesn't really believe in God. He doesn't believe in the afterlife. He doesn't believe in the immortal soul. He doesn't really believe in sin other than morality, and that morality can depend on who is making the argument. So it's not even just a general societal morality. It's that each person can have their own moral compass, and within that, what is moral to one person is not moral to another, and they're both right. He's early on the great debater with making arguments that he doesn't believe in, and then he kind of disappears. He's here and there, but he's very, very little interactions with the characters. So I just got to the point today that I probably most distinctly remember from reading this when I was like 13, where Ivan and Alyosha, who are full brothers and they're half brothers with Dmitri, are talking over dinner. And this just started. They're in a restaurant, they're in a tavern. And I remember this from the last time I read it as like one of the most pivotal points of the book, because you really get an insight into both Ivan and Alyosha, their relationship with each other and their worldviews. So I just got to the point where they've met up and they're about to dine together. So I haven't gotten into any of the actual philosophical discussions. I have been listening to it on audiobook because I just don't have the time to read this. As far as enjoyment, I can't really make much of a face right now, but if I did, it would be kind of... I don't hate it. I'm not disliking it, but I'm also not really drawn into it. I'm not really connecting with any of the characters. I'm just waiting for the old guy to die. I'm waiting for him to get knocked off so that it can really dive into what I think the novel is more about. But he's still alive. He's still kicking. He's being his normal self. And, you know, it's very much setting up Dmitri to look like the most likely suspect. Because, you know, Dmitri kind of just beat him up and threatened to kill him. So he's got, you know, he's got motive. Okay, I'm gonna crack this mask because I think it's dry now. Oh God. Oh my God. Have you guys ever done this zombie mask? This is like only my second time doing it. Oh, look at that. Oh, so gross. Okay, I'm gonna go rinse this off and put on some moisturizer because my skin is screaming at me right now. But so far, those are my thoughts on the Brothers Karamazov. I cannot wait to get to The Stranger, though, because I really want to see how this compares. I want to see that same philosophical discussion from a completely different perspective. So yeah, that's my reading updates, and I'm so glad I can move my face again. I will check in with you guys later. Back. It's like 2 weeks after my last update, at least. Still working on this. I don't even know how far through I am. Not far enough because I have a week and a half left, and I still have to read The Stranger by Camus. I'm struggling, very, very much struggling. And so what I'm actually trying to do now is go through still Alyosha and Ivan's big philosophical talk over dinner, because I listened to it on audio and there's so many parts of it that I wanted to annotate and highlight and make notes, and so that's what I'm kind of doing. And I'm realizing that my highlighters, which I really like, they're erasable. So I know how to work my phone. You can erase with this end and it works great, but they're so light on some of the colors. And I'm trying to color code the tabs, obviously, to go along with it. But I have not had a chance to get back to this to do more annotating, and it's bothering me because I feel like it's kind of also preventing me from, part of what's preventing me from like listening and continuing on with the book is that I want to get to this annotation and I feel like I can't. But also just for a million other reasons, life and everything. And I decided today after work after, this is very important to note, this is after I finished my workday. I decided to play around with some makeup. I don't know why. I don't wear makeup. I wear mascara and some under eye cover up because I've got, you know, raccoon face, but other than that, I really don't wear anything. And when I do, this is glammed up, which is cover up under my eyes, liner, mascara, and I put on some green sparkle. Basically what this is this is what I wear to Renfest. When I go, I put on green eyeshadow. That's it. And I just, after the end of the day, I just had a whim, and I'm like, you know what? Let's put on some green eyeshadow and see if you feel good about yourself. A little, it did help a little. Not enough to you know, not still feel dread about finishing this book. So I'm gonna try to dig back into this for a little bit, see how far I get. One thing that's really interesting to me about this section, this is where Ivan is talking about his poem that he created, this epic poem, kind of reminiscent a little of Dante, the Divine Comedy, and others. His entire thesis really is about freedom, freedom of choice, freedom from choice, freedom from responsibility, freedom from not only pain, but the pain of conscience. I just find this really, really interesting. He uses some scriptural references, both to kind of give context and then also to try to refute it. And it's interesting because he's telling all this to Alyosha, who is obviously serving in a monastery. But one of the biggest things that I've noticed about this book is anything as it relates to spirituality and scriptural application is very much the Russian Orthodox Church and the Russian Orthodox faith versus the Roman Catholic faith. They're very much at odds. They very much have differing opinions on what the scriptures mean and what it means to serve God faithfully, devoutly, unselfishly, and correctly. And so much of the novel is, in fact, from the perspective of the Russian Orthodox Church and their monastic and, what is the word that they use? It's not spiritual, it's mystic, the mysticism. That is part of their faith that is very much not a part of the Roman Catholic faith, at least not in the same ways. So yeah, I'm still not quite through that. This is the part that I really, really wanted to dive into because this is basically Dostoyevsky putting on complete display the character of Ivan and how he sees the world, which is in stark contrast to others in the novel. Probably your average Russian with any sort of religious faith. This is very much in conflict with that, and I just find it really interesting. And that Alyosha just sits and listens through the whole thing, asking a question here and there to really try to understand. So I just finished the Brothers Karamazov. I still have some annotations to finish up on because I did listen to the audiobook, so I had to kind of bookmark and decide to go back. But I finally am finished, and I get to start on The Stranger by Camus. So final thoughts for now on the Brothers Karamazov, probably about a 4-star from me. I definitely like the middle section. The beginning is quite slow. The ending is fine. I mean, it's needed to kind of wrap up the story, but really the big middle section, it's one big philosophy and debate book, and that meat is really in the middle where you would expect it. I don't know, I feel like I'm rambling. But I liked it. Hot take, don't read Dostoyevsky at 13 because you're not going to get it and you're not going to enjoy it. Wait a little bit. So there's my tip of the day. So I'm excited to finally be done with it though, because it was a chonker and it was really a struggle for me this month, for the last 2 straight months, to finish it. So I'm going to be reading Camus, and I will let you know how that goes. Hello, book buddies. For me, it has been quite a while since I have given you guys an update for you. Thankfully, it's only been a couple of seconds. I am reading, actually no, I just finished The Stranger by Camus. This went so quickly. It's 123 pages, decently large font, and the print is, well, of course, I happen to open to a page with no print on it. It's really hard one-handed. That's what he said. So you can see really huge margins, very quick. What are my thoughts? This really reminded me through so much of the novel up until like the very end, like maybe the last 5 or 10 pages, this reminded me of Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human. The main characters felt very similar to me. They didn't necessarily have the same philosophies, but their kind of inner monologue and the way that they viewed and acted and moved through the world felt very similar. And I just found that really interesting. So I gotta sit with this a little bit. I don't know what my final rating is gonna be. I kind of want to look up some Cliff Notes or Spark Notes on both the Brothers Karamazov and The Stranger, because I don't have anybody to talk to about these books. It's, I've already pulled out what I can pull from them, but I know that I'm missing so much, so I want to kind of go through and read some more academic helping hands sort of thing, because I that always enhances my experience, especially with classic literature. Just a quick rundown though, the differences besides obviously the size. In this book, you know who the killer is. It's very clear. There's no ambiguity. It's more a question of why. Whereas in the Brothers Karamazov, there is a question of who actually killed Fyodor Karamazov. I'll talk about that, I think, more in my Game of Tomes response video, probably, after the Game of Tomes live show. I don't know. I gotta give this some time. I gotta give this some thought. I will have another clip, I think, finally wrapping up my thoughts about the 2 books. But the Brothers Karamazov, what are you doing? Please don't eat my cords. Oh, you're playing with Velcro, your favorite toy. Despite all of the toys that I buy you, you only like Velcro. As I was saying, the Brothers Karamazov dealt a lot with the philosophy of spirituality and religion versus atheism, versus not believing in a God, in a higher power, and therefore is there such a thing as morality? And if there is no sin, can there be crime, sort of thing. This one, I feel like I've only picked it up on a very surface level, which is why I need to look into it more. Morality very rarely comes into the picture here. The main character is very just matter of fact about things. He doesn't show a lot of emotion. Even his happy times, he doesn't really have any attachment to until he loses his freedom, and his happiness and his freedom to do what he wants are taken away. But it's a really interesting look into a human perspective that I don't think a lot of us have a lot of experience with. He doesn't feel a lot of strong emotion until really the very end. He really doesn't have any remorse for what he's done. His mother dies at the very, very beginning of the book, and he's very unaffected, but not in a evil or calloused way. It's like he's detached from it, which is, I think, why it really reminds me of No Longer Human. There's such a detachment of this character from what most humans seem to have in their life experience, in their personal lives, their family relationships, their friendships, their community. There's just a huge disconnect there. So yeah, I'm gonna go do a little bit of research and probably annotate a little bit. But again, with this being so short, I ended up just kind of flying through it, and I think I just need to sit with it for a little bit. So final thoughts on the Brothers Karamazov and The Stranger for this reading vlog. This had absolutely no vlog to it because it's so short. These were both really interesting, very philosophical, and the really connecting theme between the two of these is about absolute moralism. I know that there's probably actual like philosophical terms and studies and things. I don't know what they are, but the premise, especially in The Stranger, is that there is no God. So if there is no God, can there be absolute morality? And if there is no God, then there can't be absolute morality. And so even something like murder isn't really amoral or immoral. There's just an amorality, just nothing matters. I believe it's kind of in the realm of existentialism. Again, I never took philosophy classes, so I don't really know all the different schools of thought and the correct terminology and stuff. So I do apologize. If you are more well versed in this and you want to leave some comments down below and kind of correct me and, you know, share the knowledge and teach myself and others, that would be great. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. But basically with Camus, like I said, this really reminded me of Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human, which I don't have nearby, otherwise I would grab it. I would say if you're going to kind of compare two books, I would almost compare these two. They're both actually very short. They're about the same size. I think No Longer Human might be a little longer. For me, I think the most interesting thing in The Stranger wasn't so much the discussion, sorry, face itches, wasn't so much the discussion of morality as it was being human, because The Stranger feels very almost psychopathic in that, like, almost like he feels no emotions whatsoever, other than sort of contentment. I wouldn't even say necessarily joy or happiness or love. He actually has asked a few times in here by his girlfriend if he loves her, and I mean, they've been dating for like a week, so no. But the character doesn't really seem to have the capacity for love so much as he does the capacity for logic, and fitting into general societal norms. And I think it's a really interesting character in that regard, because he almost doesn't feel human. So he's almost outside of the moral code that kind of humanity lives by, regardless of where you're from. You know, murder's generally frowned upon. And he's like, well, what does it matter? We're all going to die eventually, so it kind of doesn't matter when or how or by whom. Death is death. It all ends the same, so what does it matter? It's really very interesting. It's very passive, though. You kind of see snippets of conversations and kind of thoughts that are going through his head. There is so much imagery and motivation and plot points from the son in this book. The son is the cause of so much of the story and so much of the development that we see and understand of the character. I really need to dive into it more to figure out what I'm reading. Like I said, very surface level, but I am trying to kind of get some deep dives. This, I would say the character in here is most closely related to Ivan from the Brothers Karamazov. So we'll switch over to Ivan. He is the intellectual of the three. So there's Dmitri, who is the sensualist. He really cares mostly about his own pleasure in the moment. He really does not have deep moral discussions, but I'm going to say he has more of a conscience than Ivan that is more closely tied to kind of standard human thought, rule of law, and with, roots in spirituality. But he doesn't follow that conscience. He knows that there are things that are wrong, and he doesn't care. He does them anyway, because he just sees it all as a means to an end. All he cares about is getting with Grushenka. All he cares about is what will get him to that end, and for him it's money. And so he does acknowledge that things like murdering his father, would be wrong, but it doesn't really touch him deeply. He knows it on an intellectual level. He knows it on a societal level. There are parts of him that do feel guilt and remorse for his actions, but they are far outweighed by his desires. So I think he's a really well pictured sensualist as a character, being the one who most takes after his father. His father, I think, takes it to really even further extremes. He doesn't murder anybody like on page, but you get the sense that he is by no means above it. But he's more conniving, so he would probably have somebody else do his dirty work for him, is my impression. Then you have Ivan, the middle son, who is the pure intellectualist, and he is the one that ties very closely to The Stranger, where it comes up with that exact same question, whereas Ivan really asks it. The Stranger assumes it. The assumed premise is there is no God, so there is no morality. Ivan, however, has very deep philosophical discussions with the elder Zosima from the monastery, as well as his little younger brother Alyosha, who is the spiritualist. And he asks the question, okay, but what if? What if there is no God? And if so, can there be sin? If there can be no sin, then there really can be no morality. But Ivan himself, within the text, says that it's not that he doesn't believe in God, it's that he does not approve of God's sense of justice. He really doesn't approve of God's sense of morality, because if God doesn't exist, there can be no morality. If God does exist, how could he let such awful things happen? And Ivan goes through this long laundry list of really awful things, and he uses that to his point of, if there is a God, then Ivan rejects him, because he does not want to live in the world that God has created or allowed to happen, basically. For most of the actual, really deep discussion, Alyosha simply listens. He does not refute. He simply tries to understand Ivan. And that's something that's interesting about this book. Dostoyevsky does a really good job. Ivan is his devil's advocate character, while he, as an author, as a person, aligns most closely with Alyosha. But he wrote Ivan so convincingly that he really struggled, if I remember the preface correctly, he really struggled with refuting Ivan within the book. And I think what he really ends up doing is he refutes Ivan's intellectual discussions with Alyosha's living actions. Alyosha lives his beliefs. He loves people. He believes in true, pure forgiveness. He believes in the goodness of people, and whether or not they subscribe to the Russian Orthodox Church, the mysticism, the deep spirituality of himself and others, that there is still spirituality within the person if they have any redeeming qualities, basically. And I believe it kind of goes along with the Apostle Paul in the Bible, where he is a law unto himself, basically, for those. He talks about being a law unto himself, where it's the conscience, it's the human conscience of, even if somebody doesn't have a specific religion or a specific spirituality that they subscribe to, there's still this innate human conscience that tells you the difference between right and wrong. And Alyosha basically lives it through his actions, and that, I believe, in my opinion, is the counter argument to Ivan. And Ivan goes through his own spiritual crisis at the end of the book, when it's kind of revealed that he has unwittingly or maybe subconsciously abetted the murder of his own father. And he has these visions where he is interacting with the devil in the form of a man. And it then brings up, if pure evil exists, then the devil must be real. If the devil is real, then God must be real. And it really shakes Ivan to his core, the worldview and morality and lack thereof. So this is a very deep book, but it's also, in a way, very easy to read. Yes, there are a lot of characters. There's a lot of Russian names. If you're not familiar with Russian names, it can get confusing. I would definitely recommend finding a copy that has a character list in it that you can refer to. But in my opinion, the way it's no War and Peace. I mean, let's just put it that way. The way that Dostoyevsky writes the story and introduces the characters, and the first section is kind of an info dump, but he's very much giving you background on the characters. He's not saying this is this person who did this thing on this time, this is their worldview. He has all of the characters meeting with each other at the beginning of the book and interacting, and that's where you kind of get the sense of each person, their background, and he continues to bring these characters into the story because this is in a very small community, and so it's natural that you would see these interactions with these people, and through that you get to know who's who. Even the minor characters that will play some part, especially at the end in the trial of Dmitri, because he is accused of murdering his father, you know the characters by that time. So in my opinion, it's not all that confusing. There is a very deep, it's where most of my tabs are, and you can tell when I gave up on annotating because I just listened to it through audiobook. There is a very deep philosophical discussion where Ivan and Alyosha are having dinner, and that's where the crux of the book is. I really think that that is the heart of the book, and it's mostly through Ivan reciting this poem that he wrote called The Grand Inquisition, where he's basically saying if Christ were to come back today, he would not be treated well. And the Roman Catholic Church specifically would do the same thing that happened to him the first time. Basically, they would twist the people's view of him, they would imprison him, they would execute him, because the church wants to retain, for the love of goodness. The church would want to retain their power over the people, but they're spinning it in an altruistic way, that they are really the ones saving the people from themselves. And that discussion is less about morality than it is about free will. And the two are definitely tied together, but Ivan's argument is that people really don't want to be free because then the consequences of their actions really are their own. But if they can lean on somebody else, something else, and be told what to do and how to live and how to act, it takes away that pressure of free will. And the desire for freedom is really an illusion. People really don't want to be free at their core, is Ivan's argument. And it's done through the Grand Inquisitor talking to who is supposedly Christ come back to earth, to do like a second mission of, not necessarily to bring the rapture or anything, to bring about the end of the world, to destroy the wicked. It's basically Christ on earth redux. And so this is something he even has basically created this literary work to explain and push his ideals to others. It's a really interesting section. I do wish Dostoyevsky would have had Alyosha refuting it from his perspective, so you can see the back and forth. But you do kind of get throughout the rest of the works that Alyosha doesn't necessarily feel equipped or feel the need to defend religion or Christianity or spiritualism. He feels like the refutation happens by living in that truth, by living in that way, and by following in Christ's footsteps more than by arguing with people about it. Really beautiful work. It is quite deep. It is quite a lot to chew on, but just to read it and to get the story, to get the overall impression of it, I definitely think you can read through this and get a lot out of what Dostoyevsky was trying to start discussions about. But this is one you could easily take a course on or have a book club discussion about. And I believe every time you read this, you're going to get more and more out of it. You're going to see more and more of what Dostoyevsky was trying to do. I definitely think he was masterful in his execution of this work. I believe this was his last one, and I think it's also considered his best work, but it's probably not his most well read. I would say probably Crime and Punishment more people would have read than this one. But I really enjoyed it. Definitely enjoyed it more than when I was a teenager reading it my first time. I do think I can see myself rereading this in a couple of years and getting more and more out of it each time. So I did enjoy this. I would say it kind of feels like sacrilege to give certain books less than 5 stars, but again, my rating is not just on how well executed a book was, how well written it was. It's very subjective. It's did I enjoy my experience or not? For Dostoyevsky, I would probably say it's at a 4-star. I enjoyed how much it made me think. I didn't necessarily enjoy the reading experience or the story in a way that I would other books, like The Count of Monte Cristo was just fun, along with being super, super deep. This definitely had humorous parts, especially at the beginning, but I enjoyed how much it really, really made me think about each side of a debate and how do I view the world and how would I defend my beliefs if I was faced with somebody of an opposing viewpoint. So I really enjoyed the complexity of it. So I would say 4 stars probably, but in a different way than a lot of my 4-star books, if that makes any sense. And then The Stranger, a very different book, but very successfully it talks about similar themes in way different page count. I would say this one is probably closer to a 3-star, maybe 3.5 the longer I sit with it and the way that I can compare it to Ivan. It wasn't enjoyable. It wasn't like a fun read per se, but it was a very interesting way of telling the story and describing this character and talking about these philosophical ideas. Again, it makes you think. And if that is what you're looking for, I would highly recommend both of these books. So I'm going to say 4 stars for Karamazov and probably 3.5 for The Stranger. So I will be anxiously awaiting Emma and Carolyn's live show for these 2 books. And then I will be obviously doing a live show response. I know that I'm going to learn so much more about these works from hearing their discussions. So I'm super excited about that. I hope that you join the live show or watch it later if you can't join live, but please leave some comments down below and let me know if you've read either of these, what you think about them as novels, as books, what you think about their subject matter. If you haven't read them, do these at all sound interesting or not? Or do you have any recommendations along these lines that if somebody wants to continue on reading these types of books, please leave some comments down below. This is definitely not my typical reading style, so other than this and No Longer Human, I don't really have any additional recommendations, but please share your favorites. That is all for this vlog. Thank you so much for following as I read through these 2 incredibly dense novels. And take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.